of those people who was actually born in Canberra. But I spent most of my formative years in Cooma, where we moved to when I was just before I turned 1. So I spent most of the 1960s and 1970s in Cooma, went to primary school and high school in Cooma. My father is a civil engineer and he worked on the Snowy scheme, and then subsequent to the scheme completing, he joined the Snowy Mountains Engineering Corporation and basically spent the rest of his working life doing that until now, and he's a consulting engineer at 75 and still enjoying it. I'm the oldest of 3 girls, and my youngest sister was born with Down syndrome, which has had a pretty profound influence on the whole family, but certainly it's influenced me and my values and my views of the world. It's given me a reasonably strong sense of social justice and a strong sense about the importance of society looking after particularly vulnerable people. Sadly, she died in 2003 after an epileptic seizure, so that was also a pretty profound event for the family, but we were very blessed to have her for as long as we did. So I went to high school in Cooma, to Monero High School, and after that I moved to Sydney and lived on campus at the University of Sydney and completed a Bachelor of Science degree. My majors were in biochemistry and pharmacology. I also completed a graduate diploma in Library and Information Science and started my working life at the National Library, working mainly with medical databases. At that time, you didn't have this wonderful internet and you didn't have this wonderful access to information systems that we have now, and things were much more controlled through bodies like the National Library. And that was wonderful. I did a lot of training of people, medical professionals, and got to travel all around Australia. I also took the opportunity at the time of working in the public service of taking some leave and travelling to Europe for the first time, and not the last time. And after that, and in fact it was really through that work that I moved into the pharmaceutical industry, and I worked in the pharmaceutical industry in Sydney and then subsequently in the UK for quite a number of years. I worked for what was then SmithKline & French, became GlaxoSmithKline, and also Pfizer, the Viagra company. And if we had lots of time, I'd tell you a very funny story about that, but I don't think we've got lots of time, so I won't. But I lived in the UK from 1992 to 1998, working for Pfizer, and that was just a wonderful experience. It was a great time to be in the pharmaceutical industry because there was a lot of changes going on in Europe. It was a great time with the company, and I got to do a lot of travelling to the States and a lot of travelling in Europe. Also had my one and only trip to Africa, and I took a holiday to Zambia and Zimbabwe, and that remains one of my most memorable trips. And then in late 1998 I decided it was time to come home. My sister had 3 young children by that stage. My parents were obviously getting older, and so I came back and got myself a job at the Therapeutic Goods Administration, which is the regulator of medicines and medical devices. So it was a little bit like being poacher turned gamekeeper, I suppose. And I worked at the TGA for quite a number of years. In fact, pretty much up until 2010, when I moved to another department. I worked at the TGA. It was whilst I was at the TGA that I met Jonathan, whom is now my husband, and he was my boss, and he didn't stay my boss for very long. We both moved into different work areas so that there was no possibility of a conflict, and we got married in early 2001 and have been happily married ever since. And it's because of Jonathan that I'm now living in Darwin, because earlier this year he was asked to move to the Northern Territory to become the Regional Manager for the Department of Agriculture, basically for Northern Australia, so Broome across to Cairns and everything north, plus all of the Northern Territory. And so we've been here since the end of April, and I've taken the opportunity to have a bit of a break from work after working for many, many years, and I'm just loving it. I'm getting involved in various community activities up here. I'm a community visitor with Anglicare, so I visit a nursing home every week, and I am also becoming involved in the National Trust up here, and I do some volunteering at a little National Trust property that's managed to survive the bombing of Darwin, Cyclone Tracy. Almost didn't survive the developers, but finally did after a lot of protesting by locals. And so I help out there. And that's basically brought me up to where I am. I joined Rotary back in 2007, I think. I was introduced to Rotary through a work colleague of mine who's now the president of the Rotary Club of Woden. That's the club I joined. And but I started to find the weekly meetings very, very difficult to get to with my work, and so found the notion of an e-club quite appealing. And it's good to be able to have some connections through the internet every week with you guys. I'm just sorry I can't be involved in more of the service that you're involved in. And I guess that basically brings things up to here. Jonathan and I own a very small house in France, in southwest France, near the city of Carcassonne, and we try to get there. We were there last year for about 6 weeks, and we're aiming to go over there next year for about 6 weeks. Eventually we'd like to spend a little bit longer there if we can. And we both really enjoy France. It's a beautiful village, and we have met some really lovely people over there. They don't have a Rotary club in the village. It's too small, I think, but I'm sure there's Rotary around in France. And that's basically about it. The only other significant other in our family is our dog Gilbert, who's just lying next to me. He's keeping guard because the Halloween trick-or-treaters keep coming to the door, and he's quite fascinated by them. He was growling at them to begin with, but I think he's worked out that they're okay. So he's just, and they're just ringing the bell at the door. So can you bear with me for 2 minutes while I go and give them some chocolate, and it'll be back.
We talk to the dog in the meantime?
I think he's already gone.
I think the dog might have.
Gilbert will be down at the door.
I bought a whole lot of lollies for trick or treat, and nobody came to the door.
No, I've dodged that bullet tonight too.
Yeah. Mm.
Sorry about that. I think
we were sorry that